Okay.
Awesome. So my name is Matt Johnson. Joining me, of course, Billy Gilbert, that everyone knows and love. We are going to be talking through two new additions to the Cloud Catalog. First off, we're going to be discussing Magento Commerce Cloud 2FA for SSH. And then after a quick demo on that, we'll be going on to new Relic Logs, which has also been released. So first off, for 2FA for SSH, first off, why are we doing this? And the TLDR of everything is that over the past couple of years, we've been seeing an increasing number of cloud customer stores being compromised due to SSH mismanagement and SSH-based attacks. It's really become a big attack vector and one that we wanted to really plug up and get in the green. So to be clear on what 2FA on SSH is, it's not necessarily about using 2FA during the SSH login itself, but about ensuring that the credentials used for SSH have been acquired by a means of a flow that was protected by 2FA. And what that really means is logging into your cloud account via 2FA really covers that mechanism. And so generating that access token that has the parts necessary to SSH into those containers, as I said, that user must have logged in into the .cloud UI after using 2FA. And so you're going to want to make sure that 2FA is enabled on accounts.magento.cloud in order to be able to use this functionality at all. And the access token that's granted as part of that then keeps track of that authentication fact. And that token is then used to generate these SSH certificates. Now, from a broader standpoint and from our merchant and SI community standpoint, 2FA is project level. And so what that means is that once 2FA for SSH is enabled on a project, all users with SSH access to that project, or to SSH access to that project will need to go via 2FA. So it's not just user, it is for project. Very much want to call that out. Out of the gates, 2FA for SSH is not enabled as default for all projects. So it's something that project owners are going to need to request. Project owners need to submit Zendesk tickets to request enablement of the feature. And while I was going to update the second bullet point here, or I thought I did, so sorry about that, but what this really means is platform admin is a role construct for internal Adobe Magento users that really says anyone who has admin access internally to projects is going to have the 2FA for SSH enforced on them. So there are no internal Adobe or Magento employees that are able to SSH without this functionality at the admin level. We do support machine-based account usage via use of an API token. This can be generated in your account's UI on cloud. And at this point, I will hand it off to Billy to go ahead and give an actual walkthrough.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Switching to my screen share, so please let me know if you're seeing my screen with the thumbs up, but I'll go ahead and dive in here. So yeah, we're going to go and do a demo now. So what you'll see, what I have up on my screen is what will happen if you try to SSH into a project that has 2FA enabled, but you have not authenticated, right? So what we're seeing here is this reason access requires MFA. So like Matt said, there's a few key points here. So the first thing you need to do is authenticate through the Magento Cloud 2FA to the Magento.cloud site. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just do MGC login, which is going to give me the browser login here. So I've already authenticated to Magento.cloud, and it's got my 2FA cached, since you do have the option to remember that. But just to show where that's set up, if you go to your name and then account settings, you will see a section on the bottom here for security where you can set up a TFA application. So you can also see that I have trusted browsers here set to not expire, and then the application itself. So now that I've logged in, um, there's a configuration I have locally that's already generated the certificate. So what you'll notice now is if I attempt the SSH command again, it is going to allow me through to the site. So you'll see I'm now able to authenticate. Now, I want to show a few of the configurations here so you can get a little bit of the inside scoop as to what's actually happening. So if I go look in my actual SSH folder now, you'll notice that I have a config file here. Now, I already previously had this generated for a few commands, such as putting in my identity file. But what you're going to notice here is that it has added these last 4 lines to my SSH config file. So in this case, it's just going to be including additional configurations, but you're going to notice that this is going to be in that .magento-cloud folder. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so, excuse me. All right, so if we take a look here, what we're getting is this session.config file. So if I go ahead and put out the outputs for that, you're going to notice very similarly, we're getting this session config, right? So again, we'll go take a look at that file. And that should contain the meat of what is actually being modified here. So what you're going to notice here, we've got an automatic refresh. So, in the event, we need to regenerate it, that go ahead and takes care of it for us. So that's going to make it so the certificate will continue to be generated. And then what you're going to notice that it's going to actually add this additional certificate file, right? And as well as identity file. So this key right here, this private key is generated by the CLI, so that you will have that available. And then this cert is the actual SSH certificate generated. And then, of course, it does add my additional, or my default private key that I've generated for my account, so that'll stay there as well. The one thing we do recommend is if you are having any issues with SSH, go ahead and run the command with the -dbv option. The reason I think that's really important is you're going to see the identity files that it's trying to generate or trying to use. So, of course, we can see here it's using the certificate. And then, of course, it accepted it. So if you're running into any issues, particularly if you're using, going between, accounts that include 2FA having enabled and not, go ahead and check those configurations. The other thing that is a fairly new rollout that we've exposed is the ability to authenticate via an API token. So I won't show that for security purposes, but if we take a look at the authentication space, you'll notice this API token login. Now, on your user account, if you take a look, you now have an API tokens, and from here you create an API token that you can use to log in. The thing that's very convenient about this is that if you generate this token while you are authenticated with 2FA, it will maintain that level of access. So if I were to go ahead and do that, it'll ask me for the token, I would enter it, and then it would be considered a 2FA authentication. This can also be used to create machine accounts. So if you have any type of automation that you use, that can that can be used to automate SSH scripts. A few other things I want to show is this DevDocs link. So it's got some really great examples. Of course, everything we're discussing here. The one that I want to show in particular is this Magento Cloud config. So if you create this file and put this configuration in there, it will actually create a certificate for you every time you log in. So you'll be able to skip that step. Of course, it still requires the 2FA login to Magento.cloud, but this is very helpful, particularly if you're doing any type of automation around SSH. The other thing we like to point out is that this also impacts Git, which is of course done on Magento Cloud through SSH. So be aware if you're trying to do any Git operations, you will need to authenticate with MFA as well. And then just the final thing I want to show is the way you can view if a project is configured for MFA. So this is going to be my project. So if you run this command, this curl command to the /settings endpoint, you're going to get a list of the configurations for your project. But what you'll notice here is there's an enforce MFA. Now, of course, as Matt noted, for all internal users, we always have to use MFA. So as an Adobe employee, I have to use MFA for any project. But you'll notice this particular project is not directly configured for MFA. So this is a way you can double check a project. And then, of course, as Matt noted, if you do wish to enable this on a project, you will need to request that through support. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt for the next portion of our presentation.
Well, thanks, Billy. So I'll keep this short and sweet so we can get to the meat of it. But the next piece here, as I mentioned, is NewRelic Logs, which was just released in conjunction with 2.4 last week. You do not need to be on 2.4 to use logs. This has been added to our NewRelic suite of products. So now, along with APM and infrastructure, you also have access to the logs functionality. Within logs, we are aggregating our application, our cluster logs, as well as all Fastly, CDN, and WAF logs. So you have the full data set to actually query against. And with NewRelic, we're going to really go through the querying to search aggregated log data. So again, across the app infra and all Fastly logs, visualizing this log data and how to work with that interface. And then you do also have the ability to create custom charts and dashboards and alerts. Alerting is a lifesaver, as many folks often know. And this is really part of the narrative that Cloud has really been undergoing over the past year and a half on transforming from a black box into putting more control in the user's hands. So having you need to rely less on us for visibility and you be able to control that as much as possible. You can see our dev docs for some more information, and we will be updating that in the future as we start populating with recommended queries, recommended use cases as we move forward on this. And you can also visit NewRelic documentation for the full list of functionalities as well. And with that, I will hand back over to Billy to actually go over the logging functionality.
All right, so stole the screen share from Matt, hopefully. There's the button. All right, so hopefully you all are seeing the new Relic 1 landing page. So up here, I've got one of our internal accounts. This is actually our PWA demo account. So I'll sort of show the key screens here that you're looking at for logs. So of course, the first one is the logs UI. So this screen is particularly useful for just being able to see a log stream. So give this one moment to load up. Since I have a deeper level of access, there's a fair bit that it needs to load. But yeah, so this screen in particular is going to be able to show us all of our logs, whereas there's a separate UI for actually doing more deeper, querying and aggregating and things like that, as well as NewRelic Insights. So give me one moment. I'm going to try refreshing this to see if it will load better for us. One moment, please. Well, actually, you know what? I'll start with the Insights screen. So this is, of course, NewRelic's legacy product. However, I like it because it gives you some deeper functionality. So in this case, if I go ahead and use what NewRelic calls NERQL, so NewRelic Query Language, I can just select star and see all of my logs here. So in this case, we're getting some basic information. We're seeing, which project that it came from, or which cluster rather, the source of it. And then eventually over here, we're going to see the actual message. We also have this ident field tracking, where it came from. So And then, of course, yeah, the message. So it looks like here we're getting a mix of access, PHP access logs, and it looks like a support report. So sort of the key that we use to differentiate between the logs is, again, as Matt noted, we have the Fastly logs and then, of course, the actual cluster logs. So the simplest way to look between the two of those is to, check for a field that only exists in one or the other. So with the cluster logs using the rsyslog specification, I like to just check for this ident field. So if I throw an ident is not null on here and run that query, I'm only going to get cluster logs. NewRelic does not quite, the NewRelic query language doesn't completely match SQL, so it does have some nuances. So in this case, facet is going to be basically a group by. So if I do a facet ident, this will show me all of the log counts by file name. So in this case, we're seeing, I've got 1,000 crawl logs, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we want to go and just look at Fastly logs, again, I like to use ident as sort of a pivot. So I do is null, and then let's say facet by client IP. So this is a way you could review traffic by IP and look for people performing a DDoS attack or something like that. So it does look like we have the more modern UI loaded now. Like I said, this is a very nice, clean UI for just looking at streams of logs. And again, from NewRelic 1, as much as I like the Insights page, I definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with this screen, especially because this is where NewRelic is putting a lot of their work into. So in this case, if we want to perform the same type of operation, I can do has ident. And again, we're going to see all of our cluster logs. And then to do something similar, I can do has client IP, and we can take a look at that here. You can add additional fields onto the right-hand side if depending on what you're missing. But because these are Fastly logs, we have a pretty substantial number of attributes. So you'll also notice on this left-hand side, we can see all of those in case we wanted to add additional filtering. But just to highlight a few of those that are really helpful, of course, client IP. And then another really good one is the WAF section. So we can take a look at WAF blocks, for example. So we can see that the site has had 33 WAF blocks since 12 hours ago. So it can help you to review those. Also, especially if your clients get, if they get a block through WAF, there's ID on here, request ID, that you can use to actually review that. So if I wanted to take a look at, the WAF blocks, so I can add that filter to my query. So now I'm finding all of my WAF blocks, and then I can take a look at the request IDs and actually get some more details here. So I believe there's a WAF block reason. Yeah, I'm not seeing it right off the top of my head, but yeah, you can actually, see the reason that the request was blocked. The other screens that I do want to show is this query your data screen. So this is actually the NewRelic's modernization of their insights. So, again, one of the things that's really nice about NewRelic 1 is we're bringing all of our information in. So I'll just show you logging, but in this case, let's say we wanted to take a look at cache status. So if we just want to take a look at percentage of hits, for example, so we can see how many hits we're getting over time. But yes, again, with NewRelic, you can add additional things here. So if you wanted to compare this against page views, you could plot multiple queries. So I do want to show this query builder as well. This can allow us to do some more granular querying, similar to what we're doing with Insights. So in this case, it brought over the page view query, but I'm going to copy and paste this query that I've borrowed from one of our other teams here, and copy and paste this in here. So if I run this particular query, you can actually see our Fastly hit ratio. So in this case, we're querying the Fastly logs and finding a percentage where cache status equals hit of the entirety. So you can use this to find out what your cache coverage is. And then again, as Matt noted, we can then add these to dashboards. So for example, let's say I want to make a Fastly test dashboard. So I will add that there. And then just for sanity's sake, let's add a additional query. So again, showing that we can mix multiple queries. Let's take a look and see how many exceptions we're getting. So similarly, 935 exceptions. If I take that, add that to my test dashboard, we get a nice little visualization. So I'll probably conclude it here. But once we load up the dashboard, you'll see, we can start to pull some really nice insights, into NewRelic and get a good understanding about the health of our site. And the only other thing I will note there is, on that note is, NewRelic is very rapidly upgrading this tool. One thing we noticed actually yesterday, I'm not sure when they launched it, but they've started to add some really interesting parsing features. So, we'll be exploring that, hopefully, adding that to our default rollouts for NewRelic in the future, as well as documenting around it. So y'all can use that as well. So with that, that's pretty much all I wanted to show on NewRelic. So I think that's all we have for today. So I think we'll pause there for any questions y'all might have about either of these pieces of functionality. So thank you for joining us, and happy to take any questions now. I'm having issues loading the chat, so I'm not able to see if there's any questions in chat. Matt, are you seeing any?
Nope, no questions.
All right,
Forever hold your peace. Or feel free to reach out to us directly. That's also fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Matt said, we're all in the cloud channel, the community engineering Slack. So, especially if you're watching this at a later point, the recorded session, please feel free to reach out to, either Matt or myself if you have any questions. So I think we just did have one pop up in the chat. Matt, would you mind reading that for me?
Yeah, would you have Magento app-specific logs parsed to NewRelic?
So not at this point. Right now we're using that rsyslog protocol. So right now we're just getting, basically the raw logs, not doing any parsing on it. So let me pop up my screen here. Like I said, I literally noticed this yesterday. I sent it to Matt with kind of a question mark yesterday because I didn't notice this was there. I love NewRelic because they're so rapidly developing this tool. But what I noticed yesterday on the log screen is there is the ability to do custom parsing. So if I take a look over here, we've got a manage parsing where we can specify parsing rules. So have not explored this yet, but this should be able to do that. So, in this case, we should be able to do something, where ident equals support report.log and then do some type of parsing. So, like I said, I'm very eager to explore this because when we first launched it with NewRelic, this was probably the one thing that we were really missing them from having. So, but this is custom per account, so you're certainly welcome to explore this on your own logs. And like I said, I think that we will absolutely be looking into this more. And if not rolling these out to accounts, put out documentation on what we think are best practices for parsing. There's unfortunately not a whole lot you can do on the access logs, for example, without being able to parse out IP addresses or endpoints or status codes and things like that. So be on the lookout for dev docs and things like that, where hopefully we'll be putting these out and helping you all get that parsing set up on the Magento application logs. All right, I think barring any other questions, I think we're come to a wrap. So, you have any other news from you before we close the session?
No, I guess not really. The only thing I wanted to mention that we released yesterday is updated EC tools and other packages. So if you are interested to look at those, just feel free to go through the release notes and pick those up as soon as possible. But other than that, we should be good.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Oh, it looks like we got one more question about 2FA. Uh, it should work with any Git client that's authenticating over SSH. Again, I think the main thing that you need to make sure of now is that you have the Magento Cloud CLI installed locally, so that you will be able to generate your 2FA certificate. So yeah, any Git client that works with Cloud will be authenticating over SSH. So yeah, just make sure that you're using that in tandem with the Magento Cloud CLI. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thanks all.
And like Matt said, please reach out to us over Slack if you have any more questions.
Have a good one. Appreciate your time.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.